I was at my son Trevor's birthday party when my granddaughter, Molly, grabbed my arm, her voice filled with panic. She told me we had to leave immediately, begging me to just go. I was surprised and asked her why, but I trusted her, and it was a good thing I did. Her actions saved me from what Trevor had planned. I still find it hard to believe what my son was about to do. Trevor burst through my front door without knocking, speaking before he even entered. He told me he needed me to listen to him for once, without jumping to conclusions. His self-assured tone seemed practiced, as though he'd rehearsed the conversation in his car beforehand. I slowly took off my reading glasses, folded my evening paper, and placed it on the table. The leather armchair creaked beneath me as I sat up. With a tone honed from decades of dealing with people who made impossible promises, I greeted him. I asked him what was so important that he couldn't wait for a proper hello. He walked toward my bookshelf, then turned around, waving his hands excitedly as he told me this was the chance he'd been waiting for, a real estate syndicate with guaranteed profits. I got up and walked with deliberate steps to my filing cabinet. I could feel Trevor's anxious eyes on me as I pulled out a manila folder labeled Trevor Investments 2019 to 2025. I asked him if he was sure the returns were guaranteed. He insisted this time was different, but I reminded him of the Miami condo investment. I reminded him how that guaranteed rental income became a foreclosure notice, costing him $75,000 in 3 months. Trevor's expression hardened as he recognized the documents spread across the table, bank statements, contracts, and canceled checks detailing his past mistakes. He accused me of never trusting him, his voice getting louder as he said I always sabotaged his efforts with my negativity. I then opened another folder. I mentioned the cryptocurrency mining equipment he'd paid $50,000 for that was never delivered by an online scammer. He claimed that situation was different, but I kept shuffling through the documents. I brought up the food truck business he started with a convicted felon, which had cost $30,000 and only lasted a little over 3 months. Trevor's face turned red with anger. He snatched his jacket off the couch and said I was impossible. He insisted this new syndicate had real properties, real investors, and real returns. I told him to show me the documentation, and when he admitted he didn't have it, I told him he wouldn't get my money. An awkward silence filled the room. Outside, I could see the evening shadows lengthening on my lawn and hear a neighbor's dog barking. Trevor's shoulders slumped for a moment before he straightened them, agreeing to my terms. He told me not to come begging for a share when the deal made millions without me. He then stormed out, his heavy footsteps echoing on my wooden floors. The front door slammed shut so forcefully that the windows rattled. I watched through the glass as he struggled with his car keys, all his earlier confidence gone. He started the engine with an unnecessary roar. He backed out of the driveway too quickly, scattering gravel and making his tires squeal. The red taillights of his car glowed in the twilight as he sped around the corner. I stood at the window, staring at the empty street long after the engine's sound was gone, the red glow of his taillights having vanished down Maple Street. I stepped away from the window, my reflection appearing like a ghost in the darkening pane. The house felt empty, filled with the memory of our argument. I went to the kitchen, my feet moving along the familiar path of creaking floorboards. The routine of making coffee helped to calm me. Grinding the beans, measuring the water, and listening to the steady drip filled the quiet house. I'd learned from 40 years of marriage that some conversations required coffee afterward, even if I was alone. Steam rose from my mug as I brought it to my study. I opened the filing cabinet drawer, which made a quiet, metallic sound. I took out the manila folders, arranged in chronological order. Each one represented a lesson Trevor had refused to learn. The first was from the Miami condo deal. The real estate brochure had looked convincing enough, with glossy photos of beautiful condominiums overlooking Biscayne Bay. Trevor was 34 then, still convinced he could make a quick fortune. The developer disappeared with the investor's money before any construction even began. With that $75,000 gone, I spread out the cryptocurrency documents on my desk. The mining equipment had only ever existed in online ads. Trevor had been so sure he'd found the future of wealth. He'd even shown me YouTube videos of what he claimed were mining farms. The scammer's website had looked professional, but it vanished overnight, along with $50,000. Next was the food truck partnership. I'd actually been impressed by Trevor's business plan at first, locally sourced ingredients, and a downtown location near the courthouse. But then I found out his partner had a criminal record for embezzlement. He had stolen from his last employer, but Trevor had dismissed my warnings as me just being paranoid. A few months later, the partner disappeared with the equipment and what was left of the startup money. As my coffee grew cold, I looked through the bank statements showing all the times I'd bailed him out after he gambled away his money at places like Foxwoods, Mohegan Sun, and sometimes Atlantic City with his wife, Meredith. At first, the amounts were small, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. But the requests for money had become more frequent after he got married. His usual plea was that he just needed money to tide him over until his next commission check came in. Every single folder told the same story, Trevor's endless optimism clashing with harsh reality. But tonight felt different. His anger had seemed more intense, more desperate. I'd noticed how he couldn't look me in the eye when he talked about his new syndicate, and his answers about the documentation were vague. Those were all classic red flags that I'd learned to recognize from my years of screening subcontractors. I found myself thinking about Meredith and her influence. Before he married her, Trevor's plans were smaller and less frequent. She had always encouraged his extravagant thinking, pushing him toward bigger risks to satisfy her expensive lifestyle. A family photo on my desk showed a happier time, with a younger Trevor, at 18, getting his high school diploma. He had a look of genuine pride in his eyes back then, a sense of accomplishment earned through effort. I wondered when that had changed. When had he started thinking that success didn't require hard work? My own father had built our construction business from the ground up, with calloused hands and 16-hour days. I learned the business by carrying tools, mixing concrete, and understanding all the materials. Trevor, however, wanted the success of a CEO without any of the groundwork. The lamp in my study cast a warm glow over the financial wreckage of the last 6 years, nearly $200,000 lost to bad judgment and scams. Each time, I hoped it would be his last failure, but he'd always managed to convince me the next deal would be different. I knew I was only enabling him, and that every time I helped, I just delayed the moment he would have to face the real world. I collected all the documents and put each folder back in its place. The filing cabinet shut with a sense of finality. Outside, the streetlights came on, casting light on the empty sidewalks. I knew tomorrow would bring new problems, but I felt good about my decision. Sometimes the kindest thing a father can do is say no. I switched off the lamp and went upstairs, leaving the study in the dark. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as I folded my grocery list and put it in my wallet. The argument with Trevor felt like a storm that had passed, a necessary but finished event. The coffee had cleared my thoughts, and a shower had washed away the tension from the previous day. Today was for the simple joy of daily routines. I grabbed my reusable bags from the hook in the pantry, made sure my car keys were in my pocket, and walked toward the front door. The scent of Mrs. Henderson's lilacs next door filled the air. It was perfect spring weather for running errands. Halfway down my brick walkway, I stopped. Something was wrong with my Honda. It was sitting at an odd angle, lower than usual, like a wounded animal. All 4 tires were completely flat, and the car was resting almost on its rims. A knot formed in my stomach as I walked up to the silver car. This wasn't just a slow leak from old age or a weather issue. Each tire had the same small, precise puncture marks near the sidewall, which I knew could only have been done on purpose. I knelt down next to the front passenger tire and ran my finger along the rubber. I found a metallic object sticking out of the puncture, a roofing nail, just like the ones I kept in my workshop for quick repairs. I walked around the car and found the same thing on every single tire. For nails, for tires, for deliberate acts of vandalism that must have happened sometime during the night. The timing made the picture clear in my mind. The argument the night before, Trevor's explosive anger, his threat that I would regret it when his deal made millions, and now this. It looked like a professional job, done under the cover of darkness. I took out my phone and called Trevor. He answered after a few rings, his voice sounding groggy. He wondered what was wrong, since it was only 9 in the morning. I told him I'd found my tires damaged, all 4 of them punctured. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his tone had changed to one of concerned sympathy. He said that was awful and suggested it was probably just neighborhood kids. I told him all 4 tires were damaged in a professional way, with nails driven in at an exact angle to cause the most damage. He was quiet for a moment, then asked if I was accusing him of something. His voice sounded hurt, but I'd heard Trevor lie many times before about his gambling, his failed investments, and his promises to change. I told him I was just asking if he had seen anything strange when he left my house. He insisted he drove straight home. He apologized for our argument and said he would never do something like this, suggesting I should call the police. I considered his words, but I had no real proof beyond suspicion and the timing. His denial sounded believable, and accusing him could permanently ruin what was left of our relationship. I finally told him I would just handle it through my insurance and thanked him for his concern. He asked me to wait, apologizing for yesterday and saying that we both said things we didn't mean and should talk about it later. I told him I needed to call AAA and ended the call. I looked at my car, feeling older than my 68 years. I wondered if I had misjudged him. His voice on the phone had sounded genuinely shocked and sympathetic. Maybe it was just random vandals, and the timing was a coincidence. But my 4 decades in construction had taught me to recognize patterns, and this one pointed to a conclusion I didn't want to accept. I picked up my shopping bags and went back inside. My trip to the grocery store would have to wait. When the mechanic arrived, he confirmed what I already suspected, for professionally punctured tires and $800 in damages. I was back home with a turkey sandwich and yesterday's newspaper, trying to focus on the sports section to distract myself from the suspicion growing in my gut. As I reached for my coffee, the phone rang. Trevor's name showed up on the caller ID. He asked me how my day was going, his voice sounding too cheerful to be natural, like a forced ray of sunshine. He didn't mention the tire damage or our argument from the day before. I responded carefully that my day had been interesting and that I'd spent the morning at Morrison's Tire Center. He remembered the vandalism and said that was a terrible thing to have happened. He quickly changed the subject, saying he was calling with good news. He told me that tomorrow was his 40th birthday and that Meredith had planned a special celebration. I put down my sandwich, realizing I'd completely forgotten his birthday with all the recent drama. He said it was nothing fancy, just a family dinner at 6 o'clock with Molly and a few close friends. He said it would mean a lot to him if I could be there. The invitation was a complete surprise. After our explosive argument and the tire incident, I had expected us to be on bad terms, not to receive a friendly party invitation. I told him it was very thoughtful of him to invite me, trying to gauge his sincerity. He told me that even though we had different views on money, we were still family. He added that Molly had specifically asked if I would be there and was excited to see me. Hearing my granddaughter's name brought out a protective feeling in me. Molly was always a bright spot at family gatherings, untouched by her parents' financial troubles. I decided if she wanted me there, I couldn't say no. I asked what I should bring. He told me just to come as I was, that Meredith was handling everything, the food, the decorations, and all the arrangements. Her all-out efforts usually meant straining Trevor's already fragile finances, but for once, I decided that wasn't my concern. I told him I would be there at 6 o'clock sharp. He sounded pleased, then thanked me for not making a big deal out of yesterday, saying he had been stressed about work and took it out on me. His apology sounded sincere, with a hint of the vulnerability he had as a child. I wondered again if I had misjudged the tire incident, if he was truly trying to fix our relationship. I told him to forget about it, and that I would see him tomorrow. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling a bit hopeful. Family dinners had become a rare occasion since he married Meredith. Her social life usually meant family time was limited to holidays and other required events. A birthday celebration seemed like the perfect opportunity to reconnect and close the distance between us. Molly would be there, and I imagined she'd be excited to tell me about her latest college adventures. Maybe Trevor would be in a better mood, surrounded by his friends and family. I finished my sandwich and thought about what to get him. I didn't want to get him anything too expensive, as it would send the wrong message after our conversation. I decided on something practical but thoughtful, like a good set of hand tools for his garage projects or a book about business management that he might actually read. The rest of the afternoon passed calmly. I had something positive to look forward to instead of thinking about the flat tires and family tension. I wondered if this was his way of trying to make things right. The timing seemed a little strange, but I knew birthdays had a way of putting family issues into perspective. I cleaned up my lunch dishes and went to the living room to look for a gift online. For the first time in 2 days, I felt hopeful about our relationship. The next day, a taxi dropped me off at Trevor's house. I stepped onto the brick walkway, holding the gift I'd wrapped with care. The evening air smelled of barbecue, and I could hear laughter coming from the backyard. I could see more guests than I had expected through the front windows. Trevor came to the door before I could knock, his face bright with what seemed like real happiness. He said he was glad I'd made it and invited me inside. The house was completely different. Where I remembered simple furnishings, there were now expensive-looking decorations everywhere. A new chandelier cast light on crystal glasses. The food I could see in the kitchen looked like it had been professionally catered. I wished him a happy birthday and gave him the gift, the quality tool set I had picked out carefully. I told him it was hard to believe he was 40, and he thanked me. His smile faltered for a moment, a flash of something unreadable in his eyes. He then announced that I was here to Meredith. She emerged from the kitchen, wearing an elegant dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. She told me it was wonderful that I had made it and offered to introduce me to everyone. The living room was buzzing with conversation. I saw young professionals I didn't recognize, holding wine glasses and talking about their careers and investments. The alcohol selection was impressive, featuring premium brands that Trevor certainly couldn't afford on his sales income. My granddaughter, Molly, called out my name from across the room. She rushed over and gave me a hug that felt like the most genuine welcome of the entire evening. She told me she was so glad I had come. I told her I wouldn't have missed her father's birthday and asked how college was going for her. She said finals were coming up, but she was managing. She offered to get me a drink, mentioning that her dad had stocked my favorite beer. Trevor then appeared beside us with an imported beer. He told me he remembered that I had ordered it at a steakhouse in Portland last year. I was touched that he had remembered such a small detail and accepted the beer. I wondered if his invitation had been sincere after all, and if I had been too quick to suspect my own son of the tire vandalism. The evening went on with a surprising warmth. Trevor's friends included me in their conversations, and they seemed genuinely interested in my construction business. Meredith kept my glass filled, appearing with a fresh drink and a bright smile whenever it was empty. During dinner, I commented on the lavish meal, saying it must have cost a fortune. Trevor waved his hand dismissively and said Meredith had been saving for months because she wanted his birthday to be special. But I knew the numbers didn't make sense. The catering alone would have cost thousands, not to mention the alcohol, decorations, and new furniture. I wondered where they had gotten the money for such a party when Trevor had just been begging me for investment capital a few days earlier. Meredith appeared with another bottle of wine, telling me that the Cabernet, which probably cost more than my weekly groceries, paired beautifully with the beef. I nodded, feeling the alcohol start to take effect. The evening's contradictions seemed less important as I enjoyed the simple pleasure of the family celebration. Molly was sitting next to me, chatting about her psychology classes, and her presence reminded me of what was truly important. Trevor stood to make a toast, raising his glass with a dramatic gesture. He made a toast to family, second chances, and the future. Everyone drank. The wine was exceptional, smooth and rich, probably aged longer than some of Trevor's friends had been alive. As the party went on, I started to relax completely. But something was bothering me. I noticed Trevor kept checking his watch, and Meredith's smile never quite reached her eyes. When I looked around the room, I caught them exchanging meaningful looks when they thought I wasn't watching. The party had been going for 3 hours with no sign of ending, and I was settled in Trevor's new leather armchair, another expensive addition I didn't remember from previous visits. The wine had left me pleasantly relaxed, and my earlier suspicions about the tires and expenses felt distant and unimportant. Trevor came over to me with another drink. He asked me if I would like to see the upstairs renovations and said they had done amazing work on the master suite. I was surprised by his insistence to go upstairs while the party was still going on. But before I could respond, Meredith appeared on my other side. She told me I absolutely had to see the new bathroom fixtures and that they had spared no expense. I heard that phrase again, no expense spared, from people who supposedly couldn't afford basic living expenses without my financial help. As I started to get up, Molly suddenly appeared beside me, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She gripped my arm with surprising intensity and whispered that I needed to leave right away. I was so startled I thought I had misheard her. She told me to please just go and to trust her, that something was wrong. Trevor stepped closer, his smile still on his face, asking Molly what she was talking about and saying I was just about to see the upstairs. Molly's grip tightened, and she said I was not going upstairs and that I had to go home. Her desperation instantly sobered me up. In 18 years, I had never seen her look so terrified. I told them I thought I should listen to my granddaughter and that it was getting late anyway. Trevor's cheerful facade cracked slightly as he said I was being ridiculous, and the party was just getting started and we hadn't even cut the cake yet. Meredith's voice had a sharp edge as she asked me where I was going, saying I couldn't leave before they had properly celebrated. Something in their coordinated effort to keep me there set off an alarm in my head. I'd learned over 40 years in business that when two people work that hard to keep you in one place, it usually meant you needed to be somewhere else. I told them I was feeling tired and slowly got out of the chair despite their efforts to stop me. Trevor insisted I have just one more drink, saying he had a special bottle saved. I told him another time and moved toward the front door, but Trevor stepped in my way. He told me Molly was just being dramatic from college stress. Molly made a sound like a sob, and when I looked at her, I saw tears forming in her eyes. That was all the proof I needed. I thanked them for the lovely evening and walked past Trevor toward the coat closet. I told him I would call him tomorrow. Behind me, I heard Trevor and Meredith whispering to each other in heated, low voices that confirmed Molly's warning had been justified. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, clearing away the last bit of the wine's haze. I pulled out my phone and called a taxi. As I waited, I turned back toward the house. Through the window, I could see Molly watching me, her face a mix of relief and worry. She pressed her hand against the glass as if saying goodbye. Whatever danger she had felt, I trusted her instincts completely. As the taxi came around the corner, I decided to call her to get the full story. The taxi pulled away from the curb, and I fumbled for my phone. The streetlights cast moving shadows in the back seat. My hands were trembling, and I couldn't tell if it was from the alcohol or the adrenaline of having escaped a dangerous situation. The driver probably wondered why his passenger looked like a fugitive. I called Molly, hoping she was somewhere she could talk privately. She answered on the first ring, asking if I was okay and if I was safe. The urgency in her voice confirmed my worst fears. Whatever I had escaped was real and dangerous. I told her I was in a taxi on my way home and asked her what had happened and why she had warned me. There was a long pause, and I could hear muffled party sounds in the background before a door closed. She told me she had overheard her parents talking the day before about a plan they had involving me and the party. She told me the plan was to get me drunk and have me sign business documents to transfer my company to Trevor. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My own son was plotting to steal everything I had worked for over 4 decades. I asked her if she was certain. She said there were lawyers waiting upstairs in the guest bedroom. She said Meredith had been constantly checking the time, making sure I was drinking enough wine, and that Trevor kept trying to get me to go upstairs to see the renovations. All the pieces of the puzzle fell into place with a sickening clarity. The expensive party, the constant drink refills, Trevor's nervous energy, and Meredith's calculating smiles. They had set an elaborate trap, and I had walked right into it. Molly said she had overheard enough to know they had planned it right after our argument on Tuesday night. She told me Meredith had said I was being selfish for keeping all that money when Trevor needed it for his investments. My grip tightened on the phone. They had called me selfish. Molly told me her mother was confident the plan would work, saying that older people get confused when they drink and would sign anything you put in front of them. The casual cruelty of their words stung almost as much as the betrayal itself. They had seen me as nothing more than a victim to be exploited. I told Molly to listen to me carefully and to promise me something important. I asked her not to tell her parents about our conversation. I also asked if they had said anything to her for telling me to leave. She promised to stay quiet and said Trevor had asked her why she had done it and if she knew anything. She told them she had told me to leave because it was getting late and dangerous in the neighborhood, and then went to her room. She said they had no idea she knew about their plans. I told her I would handle the situation, but she had to be careful. She agreed, but asked what they would do if their plan didn't work. I told her she had saved my life's work tonight and that I was proud of the woman she was becoming. The taxi turned onto Maple Street, and my house was visible in the distance. Mrs. Henderson was sitting on her front porch, her evening routine unchanged by the drama unfolding nearby. I told Molly I had to go. I thanked her for being the only person in the family I could trust completely. She said she loved me, and I told her I loved her too and to call me if she ever needed anything. As I ended the call, one thought kept repeating in my mind. This betrayal would not go unanswered. The taxi's taillights disappeared around the corner as I stood in my driveway, fumbling with my keys. My home felt different now, not just a sanctuary but a fortress under attack. Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor, called out to me. She was sitting in her wicker chair on the porch, wrapped in a light shawl against the evening chill. She said it was late and asked if I had just been visiting Trevor. She then commented that my car looked fixed and that the new tires were nice. I paused, my hand halfway to the door lock. I asked her how she had known about the tires. She was quiet for a moment, then stood and walked to the porch railing so we could talk without raising our voices. She told me she had been sitting on her porch on Tuesday evening, as she liked to do, and had seen something that worried her, but she wasn't sure if she should say anything. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air. I asked her what she had seen. She told me I deserved to know the truth. I walked closer to her property line, my heart pounding, and told her to tell me. She said she had seen Trevor leaving my house that night around 9:30. She said he had something in his hand as he walked around my car, checking each tire. She then saw him kneel down by each one, do something, and then look around to see if anyone was watching. The confirmation hit me hard. It wasn't random vandalism or neighborhood kids. It was my own son, deliberately destroying my property in a calculated act of revenge. I asked her if she was certain it was Trevor. She said she had known him since he was a child, and it was definitely him. She said she had heard our argument before he left, and that the sound carried on quiet evenings. She had witnessed the whole thing, our fight, his departure, his immediate revenge. The timing showed a deliberate act of malice that was far worse than a simple financial issue. She said he didn't see her sitting there in the shadows because she kept her porch light off in the evenings to see the stars better. I thanked her for telling me. She said she hadn't been sure if she should say anything because family matters are delicate and she didn't like to get involved. But when she saw me getting the new, expensive tires, she thought I should know the truth. First, the trap with the lawyers that Molly had told me about, and now the confirmed vandalism from Mrs. Henderson. My son had launched a systematic attack on me, property damage followed by an elaborate scheme to steal my business. This was no longer just about desperation, it was a war. I told her we should keep this between us for now, trying to remain calm despite the rage building inside me. She agreed and said that Trevor needed to learn to respect what I had built, and that I had worked too hard to have it torn down out of spite, even by family. Mrs. Henderson's words had the weight of decades of watching our neighborhood. She had seen Trevor grow up and had watched his gradual change from a promising young man to a bitter disappointment. Her assessment couldn't be dismissed as an outsider's opinion. I thanked her for being a good neighbor and said I should go inside. She told me to take care of yourself and to remember that if I ever needed her to confirm what she saw, she was not afraid to tell the truth. I nodded, touched by her loyalty, and walked toward my front door. I heard her settle back into her rocking chair, resuming her evening watch over our quiet street. Inside my house, I turned on every light. I stood in my living room, surrounded by 40 years of honest work and careful saving. Everything Trevor had tried to steal and everything he had already begun to destroy. The systematic nature of his attacks, financial manipulation, property damage, and the legal trap showed a calculated plan rather than desperate impulses. My son had declared war on me. It was time to respond accordingly. The morning was gray and cloudy, matching the cold determination that had settled in my chest overnight. I had barely slept, spending the night mentally going over Trevor's betrayals and thinking about his weaknesses. Now, at 7 in the morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a hot coffee and a legal pad, ready to turn my 40 years of business experience into a weapon. The initial shock had turned into something much more dangerous, strategic clarity. Trevor wanted to play hardball with a man who had built an empire from nothing. It was time to remind him who had taught him everything he knew about business. I went to my study and pulled out the filing cabinet with Trevor's investment history. Each manila folder was a lesson in financial irresponsibility, a record of poor judgment that would now be my ammunition. The Miami condo scheme, the cryptocurrency disaster, the food truck partnership with a convicted felon, all documented with contracts, bank statements, and communication records. But this wasn't about going over old failures. It was about using the information against him. Trevor had made 3 critical mistakes in his campaign against me. First, he'd underestimated my business connections. Second, He'd forgotten I possessed documentation of every failed venture he'd ever undertaken. Third, he'd assumed family loyalty would protect him from consequences. Wrong on all counts. I spread the investment documents across my desk chronologically. 75,000 lost in Miami when the developer vanished. 50,000 evaporated in cryptocurrency mining equipment that never materialized. 30,000 invested in a food truck business that collapsed when Trevor's partner, a man with embezzlement convictions, disappeared with the remaining funds. Each disaster had involved other investors, people who trusted Trevor based on his connection to my reputation. Marcus Thompson had lost 25,000 in the Miami project. David Rodriguez had invested 35,000 in the cryptocurrency scheme. Jennifer Walsh had contributed 20,000 to the food truck venture. They'd all lost money because they trusted my son. More importantly, they all belonged to Lewin's tight-knit business community. Marcus served on the Chamber of Commerce. David chaired the local investment group. Jennifer worked in financial services and valued transparency above all else. Perfect channels for information distribution. I retrieved my contact database and began compiling phone numbers and addresses. Anonymous tips required careful execution, professional presentation, documented evidence, and plausible deniability. The construction industry had taught me that reputation destruction required surgical precision, not emotional outbursts. Phase 1 would expose Trevor's pattern of financial mismanagement to his previous victims. Once they started comparing notes, the investment community would quickly understand they'd been systematically deceived. Phase 2 would target Meredith's professional relationships. Her expensive taste suggested income sources beyond Trevor's struggling sales career. A woman that calculating had to have business vulnerabilities worth exploiting. Phase 3 would involve legal and financial consequences designed to their ability to attempt future schemes against anyone. The beauty of this approach lay in its sustainability. I wouldn't need to maintain any deception or cover story. The evidence would speak for itself, and Trevor's victims would draw their own conclusions about his character and business practices. I opened my laptop and created an anonymous email account specifically for this operation. Professional courier services could handle document delivery. Timing would be crucial. Friday afternoon deployment to ensure weekend processing time and Monday consequences. The phone rang, startling me from my planning. Trevor's name appeared on the caller ID. I let it ring. Whatever excuses or explanations he wanted to offer could wait. Right now, I had work to do. By 1 o'clock Friday afternoon, my study resembled a war room. Investment documents lay arranged chronologically across my desk, organized by investor and loss amount. 3 large manila envelopes sat ready for courier delivery, each containing enough documented evidence to destroy what remained of Trevor's financial credibility. The first package was addressed to Marcus Thompson, who lost $25,000 in Trevor's Miami condo scheme. Inside were photocopies of the original investment contract, bank transfer records, and email communications showing Trevor's awareness that the developer was facing bankruptcy proceedings even as he continued collecting investor money. The second envelope contained David Rodriguez's cryptocurrency catastrophe documentation, $35,000 invested in mining equipment that existed only in online advertisements. I'd included the email thread where Trevor admitted the supplier looked questionable, but insisted the returns were too good to pass up. Jennifer Walsh's package detailed the food truck disaster, $20,000 invested in a business partnership with a convicted embezzler. The contract Trevor had signed included background check requirements he deliberately ignored. Each envelope contained a simple cover letter, information for your consideration regarding Trevor Meyer's business practices. Please review the attached documentation and draw your own conclusions. No accusations, no emotional appeals, just facts, dates, and financial records that spoke for themselves. I called Premier Courier Service and arranged same-day delivery to all 3 addresses. The timing was perfect. Friday afternoon would give the recipients weekend time to study the materials and contact each other before Monday's business day began. Anonymous delivery, the dispatcher confirmed. No problem. We'll need cash payment on pickup. Professional courier services asked no questions about anonymous packages. In 40 years of business, I'd learned that legitimate operations often required discreet information sharing. The packages left my house at 2:30 p.m. By evening, Three of Lewin's most connected business professionals would be reviewing documented evidence of Trevor's systematic deception of his investors. Marcus Thompson controlled significant influence in the Chamber of Commerce. David Rodriguez chaired the investment group that vetted local business opportunities. Jennifer Walsh's financial services firm advised half the entrepreneurs in town. Trevor had picked the wrong people to defraud and the wrong father to betray. My phone rang again. It was Trevor's third attempt to reach me since last night. This time I answered. "Dad, thank God. I've been trying to reach you since last night. I was busy, son. About yesterday. Why did you listen to Molly and leave? Did she tell you something?" "I was just tired. It's been a long week." "Listen, about yesterday, I'd like you to come over again. Meredith worked so hard on the party. She was disappointed when you couldn't stay." The casual lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. No mention of lawyers or signing papers. No acknowledgement of the trap I had escaped. "The party was great," I said neutrally. "Please thank Meredith for her hospitality." "Of course. Hey, maybe we could have lunch next week. I've been thinking about our conversation on Tuesday night, and I may have some new investment ideas that will solve your problems." More intrigue. More attempts at manipulation. This man never learned. "Let me check my schedule, and I'll call you back." "Sure, Dad. Love you. Goodbye, Trevor." I hung up and checked the clock. 3:15 p.m. The packages had been in transit for 45 minutes. By 6 o'clock, three very influential people would be reading very detailed accounts of my son's business failures. The phone rang immediately. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Part of me hoped it was Marcus Thompson calling to verify the information he just received. But maintaining anonymity was crucial to the operation's success. Let the evidence work. Let Trevor's victims reach their own conclusions. By Monday morning, the local business community would be buzzing with documented proof of Trevor Myers' systematic deception of his investors. Phase 1 was in motion. Monday morning brought confirmation that my investor campaign had achieved its intended effect. The phone had rung 6 times before 88 a.m. Business associates asking carefully worded questions about recent information regarding Trevor Myers' investment history. Word was spreading through Lewin's business community exactly as I'd planned. Marcus Thompson had called David Rodriguez Sunday evening to compare notes. David had reached out to Jennifer Walsh to verify what they'd all received. By Monday morning, 3 of the town's most influential business professionals were warning their networks about Trevor's documented pattern of investor deception. Phase 1, complete success. Time for Phase 2. I settled into my study with fresh coffee and opened a new manila folder labeled Meredith Myers Professional Standing. If Trevor was the desperate gambler, Meredith was the calculating mastermind who'd orchestrated the birthday party trap. She deserved equal consequences. Meredith worked as a senior client relationship manager at Pinnacle Financial Consulting, handling high net worth accounts that required absolute trust and professional integrity. Her position depended entirely on her reputation for ethical behavior and sound judgment. Perfect vulnerability. I spent the morning making discreet inquiries through my business network. Construction companies often worked with financial consultants, giving me legitimate reasons to ask questions about local firms and their personnel. The information proved illuminating. Meredith had been seen frequently at the Marriott Lounge on weekday afternoons, always with the same well-dressed, professional man. Multiple sources confirmed lengthy conversations over expensive wine during hours when she should have been serving clients. Her companion appeared to be a visiting executive from Portland, married, according to his wedding ring, but notably attentive to my daughter-in-law. More interesting was Meredith's spending pattern. Despite Trevor's claimed financial struggles, she'd been purchasing designer clothing, expensive jewelry, and luxury items well beyond their supposed means. Either Trevor had been lying about their finances, or Meredith had income sources he didn't know about. Both possibilities served my purposes. I drafted a professional ethics complaint to Pinnacle Financial's Human Resources Department, carefully documenting the conflict of interest between Meredith's role as a trusted financial advisor and her family's systematic attempt to defraud elderly clients through legal manipulation. The complaint highlighted how someone responsible for protecting clients' financial interests had personally participated in planning to steal my business through fraudulent legal documents and alcohol-induced incompetence. Her employer needed to know that Meredith Myers considered elderly clients' assets legitimate targets for family enrichment schemes. I included documentation of the birthday party expenses, catering, alcohol, decorations that suggested financial resources inconsistent with the struggling family finances Meredith undoubtedly portrayed to colleagues and clients. The anonymous package went out Monday afternoon via professional courier, along with a note suggesting HR investigate Meredith's recent client interactions for possible conflicts of interest or inappropriate financial advice motivated by personal gain. By Tuesday morning, Pinnacle Financial would be conducting an internal investigation of their senior relationship manager's professional ethics and client trust violations. My phone rang as I sealed the envelope. Unknown number. I let it ring, but made note of the time. Trevor was getting desperate, calling from different phones to try reaching me. Good. Desperation led to mistakes, and mistakes created opportunities. The systematic destruction of both conspirators was proceeding exactly as planned. Tuesday afternoon brought the sound I'd been expecting. Car doors slamming in my driveway with unnecessary force, followed by rapid footsteps on my front walkway. Trevor and Meredith had come calling together, unified in their desperation. The aggressive knocking confirmed their emotional state before I opened the door. Both stood on my porch, faces flushed with anger and panic. Trevor's usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by the cornered animal look of a man facing complete ruin. Meredith's calculated composure had cracked, revealing the raw fury beneath her polished exterior. "We need to talk," Trevor said, pushing past me into the house. "Now we know what you've been doing, Glenn," Meredith added, following her husband into my living room. I closed the door calmly and gestured toward the couch. "I've been expecting this conversation. Please sit down." "Don't pretend innocence," Trevor snapped, remaining standing. "You destroyed my business relationships with those anonymous letters. Marcus, David, and Jennifer all got the same information packet about investments you funded years ago." Meredith's professional anger was more controlled, but equally intense. "My employer received an ethics complaint yesterday. HR is conducting a full investigation of my client relationship practices. Someone sent detailed information about our family financial planning." I settled into my leather armchair, the same spot where this entire conflict had begun a week ago. Those complaints contained only factual information. Investors deserve to know about documented patterns of failure. "Factual?" Trevor's voice rose. "You deliberately sabotaged my reputation." "I shared truth," I replied evenly. "If truth damages your reputation, perhaps the problem lies with your actions, not my disclosure." Meredith leaned forward aggressively. "You're destroying my career over a family disagreement." "Let's discuss what really happened," I said, reaching for the folder I'd prepared for this moment. "You planned to steal 40 years of my work through fraud and manipulation." I opened the file, revealing documentation of their systematic betrayal. "Molly told me about the lawyers waiting upstairs at your birthday party. Mrs. Henderson saw Trevor puncture my tires after our argument. This wasn't desperation. This was premeditated theft." The color drained from both their faces as they realized the scope of my knowledge. Tuesday argument about money. I continued methodically. Wednesday morning tire vandalism and retaliation. Thursday evening, elaborate trap involving alcohol, lawyers, and legal documents designed to transfer my business assets. Trevor's defiance crumbled. "Dad, you don't understand the pressure we're under." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "You decided that stealing from your father was easier than building your own success." Meredith orchestrated a sophisticated fraud scheme using her professional knowledge of elder financial manipulation. "This is still family," Meredith protested weakly. "You stopped being family when you planned to rob me," I replied. "Every consequence you're facing now is earned through your own choices." Trevor slumped into the couch, finally understanding the completeness of his defeat. Meredith remained rigid, calculating whether any damage control was possible. "The investors will never trust you again, Trevor. Your business reputation is finished," I continued. "Meredith, your professional ethics investigation will likely end your career. These are natural consequences of attempted theft and fraud." "What about Molly?" Meredith asked desperately. "Molly's future remains secure. Unlike her parents, she chose to protect family instead of exploiting it. Her college education and life prospects are unaffected by your consequences." I stood, indicating the conversation was over. You declared war on me through systematic betrayal. I responded with systematic truth-telling. Justice isn't revenge. It's accountability. They left without another word, walking to their car with the defeated posture of people who'd gambled everything and lost. I watched from my porch as they drove away, probably heading home to face their destroyed lives and ruined partnership. The phone rang as their taillights disappeared. Molly's name on the caller ID. Hi, sweetheart. Grandpa, are you okay? I heard Mom and Dad talking about some kind of investigation. Everything's fine, Molly. Justice has been served and your future is safe. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too. 40 years of honest work remain protected in honest hands. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.